Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rep Class. Today I'm going to be talking about the basics of home recording and how to build a home recording studio. Everybody, of course, knows that recording yourself practicing is a great way to improve, but you can also make higher quality audition tapes, start on new compositions, make educational assets for your students, and of course, Zoom classes become exponentially more bearable once you have a functioning microphone. But what's more important than that is the fact that once you have the gear and a basic understanding of how it works and how to use it effectively, you open yourself up to a world of possibilities. In the words of the wise Luke Klingensmith of webcasting, you only make yourself more employable. So, without further ado, here's the basics of home recording. Okay, so the biggest asset in getting high quality recordings on the college or young professional budget is understanding the three domains sound can exist in our modern world, those being the acoustic, the analog, and the digital. The acoustic realm, of course, contains any sound that exists in space, so everything from a live performance of a symphony orchestra to lawnmowers or screaming children, all of them exist in the acoustic domain. In the 1870s, we first made the jump from acoustic to analog, and the analog domain is simply whenever sound is transferred through electrical means, sometimes directly to a sound capture medium like with vinyl records, but more often nowadays as a conduit for further transfer to the digital domain. And typically, the microphone is responsible for this electric transfer, but not always. We first started messing around with sound in the digital domain in the 60s, although we've only recently gained enough computer processing power to make it a practicality for music and higher level audio editing. This digital transfer is done through a process known as quantization, which you don't really need to understand but allows your computer to make sense of the electrical signal it's receiving. And of course, sound has to return to the acoustic domain in order for us to hear it, so it travels back first through a digital to analog converter and then through a speaker to reproduce sound. It's not essential to know the history and tech jargon if you just want to make practice tape demos, but what is essential to know is how to use these domains synergistically so you can get the best results with the least amount of work. So, the acoustic domain should be where you make most of your biggest decisions or changes. As percussionists, we're diligently concerned with how sound is presented to our audiences, so we should take the same measures when it comes to self-recording. The way we generate the sound to record is crucial to how the final recording sounds. The "we'll fix it in the mix" mentality rarely turns out well and always presents more work than changing your performance. Instrument choice, mallet selection, room acoustics, and most importantly, your own playing are what are going to make the biggest difference down the line. Although listening back to yourself playing may give you new reference to fix whatever performance-related problems you may be facing, the act of recording alone will not fix those problems for you. Over in the analog domain, we've got a few decisions to make as well, all related to how we best capture sound as it already exists. For the budgets we've got, this is largely going to concern the quality and quantity of mics available, and very importantly, how those mics are placed. If you can only use one or two microphones, the way you place them matters a huge amount. Most lower budget audio interfaces offer two inputs, so if that's the case with your equipment, it's a good idea to research a couple of stereo miking techniques. The XY, spaced pair, and Bloomline techniques are a good place to start, but if you've only got one mic available to you, make sure it's close enough to your source to provide enough volume, but far enough away that you capture the complete image of the source, and make sure, of course, that it isn't overly intrusive to your performance. In a more traditional studio sense, the analog realm is where outboard processing like compression, reverb, delay, or chorusing might be used. Guitar pedals are lower budget examples of outboard processing units. And important to note, most every song recorded before the late 80s was done solely in the analog domain, many of them using very few mics and got exceptionally good sounds. Just a few examples would be the iconic Motown drum sound, which only used 3 mics, and the Are You Experienced record, which could only record 4 tracks at a time, so only one was dedicated to the drums. And additionally, nearly every Ithaca College recital recording is done with only 2 microphones in a good sounding room. When we enter the digital domain, everything goes out the window. You can break the laws of physics, creating edits and sounds that would be comedically impossible to reproduce in the real world. The only true limitation is your computer processing power and your skill at using your DAW of choice. That being said, although you can change many things about the audio you receive, ultimately you are stuck with what you've got, and you can't make yourself a better player just by beat mapping your audio or using pitch correction. Okay, so on to the gear. Instead of using a low, medium, and high price range like some gear comparison websites like to use, I've opted to give options that are all roughly in the same price range. Because everybody's budget is so limited in terms of what we can spend on gear, my personal mentality is that you should make a single solid investment in each of these categories rather than spreading out your budget and not getting your money's worth. So starting with mics, we've got 3 types I've outlined: dynamic, small diaphragm condenser, and large diaphragm condenser. There are plenty of other styles of microphones. Ribbon, carbon button, and electret are just examples, but for our purposes, these are the ones that matter. Everybody knows and loves the SM57 and 58. They are industry staples. Every person alive should own one. They fully live up to their reputation, and this is not a joke. They are nearly indestructible. Dynamic mics in general are really durable and work best on loud sound sources. So for $100 that you can spend on a snare sound, a 57 really cannot be beat. The SM7B, also made by Shure, is a little bit pricier, but an extremely versatile and quality mic. You've probably noticed, the dominant choice for podcasting, but it also works great on snare drum, guitar cabs, and plenty of other sources. The Electro Voice RE20 is another great option in the kind of Swiss Army knife category if the SM7B isn't for you. And for the sake of drum set recording, the E604s by Sennheiser are super great on toms and snare, and the D112 is a great choice for bass drum. Some places will offer you an all-in-one drum set package, which can be a good choice, but they do vary dramatically in price and quality, and your interface may not even be able to take advantage of all the inputs they're offering anyway. Audix does make a good one, though. Condenser mics in general are more sensitive and usually a little bit more accurate to sound reproduction, but require phantom power, and you can't use them to replace a baseball as you might with a 57. Small or large diaphragm condensers, especially when you have them in pairs, make great drum overhead mics, marimba and vibe mics, acoustic guitar if that's your thing. Overall, they're just better at capturing nuanced sound sources. For a college budget, I would really strongly recommend owning 2 or 3 of the dynamic mics mentioned above, as well as a pair of any of the mics listed under small or large diaphragm. Price is going to vary based on what additional features these may have. You will see that the AT2035 I've got here has an additional 10 dB pad and a low-end roll-off switch. And they also vary based on the quality of their capsule. So my advice is to make the comparisons as to what you've got to spend, what you're going to be recording primarily, and importantly, how the mics sound to you. There are plenty of demos on Sweetwater's website or Reverb or whatever, sound supply source you want to go to. So make the comparisons there. So capturing sound is one thing, but equally important is our ability to reproduce it. If you're an ed major or just somebody who doesn't plan on doing a lot of audio-related work, it may not be particularly important for you to have the greatest quality speakers or headphones for your setup, but I would advise having something better than just your laptop speakers. So here's an array of options. In speakers, I can't say that I would personally recommend the KRK Rockets, but they are an incredibly popular product and they are very reasonably priced. However, the Yamaha HS series, the HS5, 7s, and 8s, are a lot more substantial and a lot better bang for your buck. Um, Billie Eilish's double platinum debut album was mixed on a pair of these, so that's, if it was good enough for that. And finally, the Adams A7Xs are kind of slowly taking over the home studio world. They're really strong, and for the price they're at, they reach into the higher end of pro level audio. So, studio grade monitors may be a frivolous expense for some of you, but everybody who calls themselves a musician should have a solid pair of headphones, if only for the purpose of enjoying the music that you listen to. The AKG K240s cost around $70 and you cannot go wrong. They are super comfortable, have an interchangeable cord, and although they're a bit mid-rangey, they do cover the whole frequency range pretty evenly. It's kind of become an inside joke that every SRT is required to own a pair of the Audio-Technica M50Xs. It's more than certain that you've seen someone walking the halls with them, and they're as popular as they are because of their reliability and their modest price point. I personally do not have a pair, but if you throw a dart at a board of SRT names, whoever you land on will probably be able to tell you why they love these headphones. And finally, the HD600s are kind of on the higher end of things, not the highest high end, but when you consider that listening to music is something you're probably going to do until you die, putting $300 into your own enjoyment seems pretty reasonable to me. I would feel totally comfortable doing a paid mixing or mastering gig on these. They are good. So for the digital side of life, we're going to look at audio interfaces and DAWs. The audio interface is like the heart or engine of your home studio, and it's really where you should be most diligent about how you're spending your money. What people don't really get about why audio interfaces are so expensive is the fact that they're actually doing like 5 jobs in one unit. Even at the lowest price points, an audio interface is typically a mic preamp, DI box, analog to digital converter, a headphone amp, a digital to analog converter, and occasionally an extra computer processing chip. For our purposes, the biggest criteria are going to be the number of inputs and the price points. And typically, the more inputs you have, the higher the price, although as you'll see, the Focusrite interface with 18 inputs still costs less than the UAD interface, which only has 2. That being said, the Focusrite 2i2 is a home recording staple. Usually this is a person's first audio interface, and it's incredibly convenient for use live or on the road. It covers all your bases, just not in the most elegant way. It does get a lot of flack from audio snobs, but for the price, it's worth what it offers. And the Scarlett series it belongs to scales up pretty seamlessly, so the 4i4 and 18i20 are both solid choices if you need to get a higher track count. I would not, however, go cheaper than a 2i2. The choices really just are not worth their cost at that point. The SSL2 and Steinberg units are both relatively new, but still a really smart choice if you want something a little bit higher end. The deciding difference between these and the Focusrite are the preamps. In the SSL2 in particular, you've got the same preamps that are in the console and Borg, and although that may mean nothing to you, it will drastically improve your audio fidelity, and if it matters to you, nobody will turn their nose up at you. The UAD Aero and Twin units from the Apollo series are both priced at a premium level, but that's because you're getting premium quality. And the primary difference here is that the interface also acts as an external computer processing chip and comes with a package of what are normally really quite expensive plugins. But if plugins aren't your thing, it's definitely not the choice for you. On to DAWs. There are 5 essential types of DAWs, those based in audio, so Pro Tools, Reaper, GarageBand. Those based in MIDI, like Logic. Those focused on electronic music production, like Ableton or Reason. Single-track audio editors, like everybody's favorite Audacity or Adobe Audition or Isotope RX. And there's music notation software. We are kind of getting closer to an age of interchangeability for most DAWs. A while ago, it was a much bigger deal as to what certain programs were best at. Slowly, it's mattering less and less which one you choose, and more which one you're comfortable with, and which one the people you are going to collaborate with use. I, along with the SRTs, will strongly recommend Pro Tools, of course. It is the most powerful, has a really wide user base, which helps with any troubleshooting problems. It's the industry standard, and a lot of people don't realize it can also be used as a basic video editor, and because Sibelius and Pro Tools have the same parent company, there is a fully functional MIDI-based notation software inside of Pro Tools. If you go for the student pricing, it's really not too bad, especially if you're serious about audio editing, but you may be better served to go with Logic or Ableton if you already have experience with them, if you have a preference toward their user interface, or if you plan on primarily using MIDI rather than audio. If you're going to buy them outright as well, Logic and Ableton are both significantly cheaper than Pro Tools. Typically, single-track and notation softwares are used in tandem with a more versatile DAW rather than to replace a DAW. So I wouldn't necessarily say that any of those would really fulfill your needs if you're looking for the standard editing and mixing functions of a DAW. But single-track software in particular can allow you to make extremely nuanced and detailed edits of stereo recordings. Typically, anybody who makes an absolute boatload of money restoring audio will be using a program like RX or Cedar Studio. Finally, we have reached the odds and sods portion of building the home studio. Just keep in mind that there will be extra expenses along the way, and typically they cost more than you would imagine, unfortunately. Cables of all kinds and stands to boot are a necessity for anything you want to record. Additionally, you may want to look into all-in-one units like the Tascam DP008X. I spent most of high school recording onto this, so it's near and dear to my heart. You could also check out its massive older brother, the DP24. My percussion teacher, Joel Smales, lent this to me. Remote recorders are also always a good backup option to units made by Zoom Audio, not the Zoom video platform we're using, are a great choice, and if it comes down to it, getting an iPhone voice memo is better than not having a recording at all. I've also brought up MIDI very frequently, and this is already a really long video, so I'm not going to explain it here, but it is a great tool to have in your studio for composing and writing automation in your DAW of choice. And finally, if you're going to be serious about running a studio, you need a massive water bottle. Personally, I go for the Poland Springs 101.4 ounce model. I got mine for 88 cents, so this one at Target is a little pricey, but this should be an investment you're not going to want to cheap out on. So that's it for building your home studio. I hope this has been helpful and educational. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll hit you up next semester with a video about MIDI.